Chapter 1, Resurrection. In the quaint, secluded town of Hollow Creek, nestled between the ancient forest and the whispering sea, there stood a grand Victorian mansion. The house, shrouded in perpetual mist, belonged to Dr. Edgar Thornon, a brilliant yet reclusive scientist who had once been celebrated for his groundbreaking work in genetic engineering. Edgar's life had taken a tragic turn 5 years prior when his beloved wife, Elizabeth, and their 2 children, Lily and Samuel, perished in a horrific airplane crash. The accident had left no survivors, and Edgar was plunged into a chasm of despair from which he thought he would never emerge. However, in the depths of his grief, Edgar found solace in his work. He became obsessed with the idea of bringing his family back, not through mere memory or memorial, but through the power of science. He delved into forbidden territories of cloning and genetic manipulation, driven by a desperate longing to see his loved ones again. The mansion's basement was transformed into a state-of-the-art laboratory, hidden from the world. Edgar spent countless nights poring over genetic sequences, experimenting with cellular regeneration, and pushing the boundaries of what was deemed ethical or even possible. His colleagues whispered about his madness, but Edgar paid them no heed. He was a man possessed, and nothing would stand in the way of his quest. After years of relentless work, Edgar finally succeeded in creating stable clones of Elizabeth, Lily, and Samuel. He watched in awe as the clones grew rapidly in their incubation chambers, their features mirroring those of his lost family with eerie precision. Edgar's heart swelled with a mix of joy and trepidation as he prepared to welcome them into his world. The day the clones were ready to be awakened, Edgar stood before the chambers, his hands trembling with anticipation. He activated the sequence, and the chambers hissed open, revealing the figures within. Elizabeth, Lily, and Samuel stepped out, their eyes fluttering open to meet the dim light of the laboratory. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice echoing through the chamber. Edgar's heart sank as he realized that while he had succeeded in recreating their bodies, their memories and personalities were not so easily duplicated. Following weeks, Edgar worked tirelessly to help the clones adjust to their new existence. He showed them photographs and videos of their former selves, recounted cherished memories, and tried to recreate the life they had once shared. Yet, despite his efforts, the clones remained distant and unsettled, their eyes haunted by a sense of displacement. The clone of his daughter began to exhibit strange behaviors. She would wander the mansion at night, her footsteps echoing through the empty halls as she whispered to herself in a language Edgar could not understand. Samuel, the clone of his son, became increasingly withdrawn, spending hours staring out the window at the forest, his eyes filled with a longing that Edgar could not comprehend. Elizabeth, meanwhile, grew more hostile towards Edgar. She accused him of playing God, of meddling with forces beyond his control. Her words cut deep, and Edgar found himself questioning the morality of his actions. Had he gone too far in his quest to defy nature? As Edgar sat in his study, poring over his notes in a desperate search for answers, he heard a soft knock at the door. Lily stood in the doorway, her eyes wide and frightened. She held out a small, worn notebook, its pages yellowed with age. "What is this, Lily?" Edgar asked, taking the notebook from her trembling hands. "I found it in the attic," she whispered. "It's yours, from before." Edgar opened the notebook, his eyes scanning the familiar handwriting. It was his journal from the days following the accident, filled with his raw grief and desperate plans. As he read, a chill ran down his spine. The entries detailed not only his scientific pursuits, but also his darkest fears and doubts. He turned to the final entry, dated the day he had successfully created the clones. The words sent a shiver down his spine. "I fear that in my hubris I have unleashed something unnatural upon the world. The clones are not mere copies. They are echoes of the past, tainted by the shadows of death. May God have mercy on us all." Edgar looked up at Lily, his heart pounding in his chest. "Lily, where did you find this?" But Lily was gone, vanished into the shadows of the mansion. Edgar rose from his chair, the notebook clutched in his hand, and set out to find her. The mansion was eerily silent as Edgar searched for Lily. The air was thick with tension, as if the very walls were holding their breath. He called out her name, his voice echoing through the empty halls, but received no response. As he made his way to the attic, he noticed that the door to the laboratory was ajar. A faint, flickering light spilled out into the hallway, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Edgar pushed the door open and stepped inside, his heart pounding in his chest. The laboratory was in disarray. Equipment lay scattered across the floor, and the incubation chambers were smashed beyond repair. In the center of the room, Elizabeth stood before a makeshift altar, her eyes glazed over as she chanted in a low, guttural language. "Elizabeth, what are you doing?" Edgar demanded, his voice trembling with fear and anger. Elizabeth turned to him, her eyes filled with a cold, otherworldly light. "You should not have meddled, Edgar," she hissed. "You should have let us rest in peace." Before Edgar could react, a shadowy figure lunged at him from the darkness. He stumbled back, his head striking the edge of a table as he fell to the floor. The world swam before his eyes, and he struggled to stay conscious. As his vision cleared, he saw Lily and Samuel standing over him, their faces contorted with a mix of sadness and malice. They reached down and grabbed him, their grips like iron, as they dragged him towards the altar. "Please," Edgar begged, his voice barely a whisper. "You are my family. I only wanted to bring you back." Elizabeth looked down at him, her expression softening for a moment. "We were your family, Edgar," she said softly, "but we are no longer. You have created abominations, and now you must face the consequences." With a swift, decisive motion, she plunged a gleaming scalpel into Edgar's chest. Pain exploded through his body, and he gasped for breath as darkness claimed him. As Edgar's life slipped away, he saw the clones standing over him, their faces now expressionless masks. They turned and walked away, leaving him to die alone in the ruins of his ambition. In the days that followed, the mansion in Hollow Creek fell silent. The townsfolk whispered of the mad scientist who had dared to play God and of the terrible price he had paid for his hubris. Some claimed to see ghostly figures wander in the halls of the mansion at night, their eyes filled with a haunting sadness. But as the years passed, the story of Dr. Edgar Thornon faded into legend, a chilling tale told by the fireside on dark and stormy nights. And the mansion stood, a crumbling monument to the dangers of meddling with the natural order, its secrets forever entombed within its shadowy walls. Chapter 2. The Aftermath. The town of Hollow Creek was forever changed by the events that transpired in the Thornon Mansion. The once quiet community was now shrouded in a veil of fear and suspicion. The locals avoided the mansion, claiming that it was cursed and that the spirits of the clones still lingered within its walls. Years passed, and the mansion fell into disrepair. A grand Victorian structure, once a symbol of Edgar's ambition and genius, now stood as a grim reminder of his folly. The forest began to reclaim the grounds, and the once manicured gardens became overgrown with weeds and tangled vines. Yet, despite the passage of time, the legend of Dr. Edgar Thornon lived on. Stories of his experiments and the tragic fate of his cloned family were passed down from generation to generation, each telling more chilling than the last. Some claimed that the clones still roamed the woods surrounding the mansion, their spectral form seeking vengeance on the living. One such tale involved a young couple who had ventured into the woods on a dare. They had heard the stories of the Thornon Mansion and, fueled by youthful bravado, decided to spend the night within its crumbling walls. As they explored the darkened halls, they began to hear whispers and faint footsteps echoing through the empty rooms. The couple huddled together in the dim light of their flashlight, their hearts pounding with fear. Suddenly, the temperature in the room plummeted and a chilling wind swept through the mansion. The air grew thick with an oppressive presence, and the couple felt an overwhelming sense of dread. Turned to flee, they saw a figure standing in the doorway. It was the clone of Elizabeth, her eyes filled with a cold, malevolent gaze. She reached out towards them, her fingers like icy talons, and the couple screamed in terror. They stumbled back, their flashlight clattering to the floor as they turned and ran. Behind them, they could hear the laughter of children, eerie and distorted, echoing through the halls. The couple fled the mansion, their minds filled with the horrifying images of the clones and the chilling laughter that pursued them. The couple's tale spread through Hollow Creek like wildfire, reigniting the fears and superstitions of the townsfolk. The mansion was declared off limits, and the local authorities posted warnings to deter curious thrill seekers from venturing too close. Yet, despite the warnings, some could not resist the allure of the Thornon Mansion and its dark history. Among them was a young journalist named Clara, who had heard the stories of Edgar Thornon and his clones and was determined to uncover the truth behind the legend. Clara arrived in Hollow Creek on a stormy autumn night, her car's headlights cutting through the dense fog that shrouded the town. She checked into the local inn, where the proprietor eyed her warily as she inquired about the Thornon Mansion. "You don't want to go poking around that place, miss," the old man warned. "There's evil in them woods, and it don't take kindly to strangers." But Clara was undeterred. She spent the following days researching the history of the Thornon family and the events that had led to Edgar's fateful experiments. She interviewed the townsfolk, many of whom were reluctant to speak of the mansion and its dark past. Eventually, Clara's persistence paid off, and she discovered an old diary hidden in the attic of the town library. The diary belonged to one of Edgar's former colleagues, a scientist who had worked with him on his early genetic research. The entries detailed the colleague's growing concerns about Edgar's obsession with cloning and his fears that the scientist was treading on dangerous ground. The final entry in the diary sent a chill down Clara's spine. It described a heated argument between the colleague and Edgar, during which Edgar had revealed his true intentions. He planned to use the clones not merely to resurrect his family, but to create a new race of beings, superior to humans in every way. "He has lost his mind," the colleague wrote. "His grief has consumed him, and he sees himself as a god, capable of shaping the very fabric of life. I fear that his ambition will be the downfall of us all." Armed with this new information, Clara decided to venture into the Thornon Mansion herself. She hoped to find evidence of Edgar's experiments and shed light on the true nature of the clones. As she made her way through the overgrown woods, she could not shake the feeling that she was being watched. The mansion loomed before her, its once grand facade now marred by crumbling stone and shattered windows. Clara took a deep breath and stepped inside, her flashlight cutting through the inky darkness. The interior of the mansion was in a state of advanced decay. Dust and cobwebs covered every surface, and the air was thick with the scent of mold and rot. Clara made her way through the labyrinthine halls, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and fear. Explored the mansion, she began to notice strange phenomena. Doors would creak open and shut of their own accord, and she could swear she heard the faint sound of footsteps following her through the shadows. She tried to dismiss the sounds as the settling of the old house, but the feeling of being watched persisted. Eventually, Clara found her way to the basement laboratory. The room was in ruins, the remnants of Edgar's experiments scattered across the floor. She sifted through the debris, her eyes scanning the faded notes and shattered equipment. As she delved deeper into the wreckage, she discovered a hidden compartment in the wall. Inside, she found a series of journals, their pages filled with Edgar's meticulous handwriting. The journals detailed the final days of his experiments, his growing desperation, and his ultimate realization that he had created something far beyond his control. "The clones are not stable," he wrote. "Their minds are fragmented, their personalities warped by the trauma of their creation. They are not my family. They are monsters, born of my own hubris and despair." Clara's blood ran cold as she read the final entry. Edgar described a horrifying vision of the clones rising up against him, their eyes filled with a malevolent intelligence. He spoke of a dark force that had taken root within them, a force that sought to consume all life. "I have unleashed a plague upon the world," he wrote, "and I fear that it is too late to stop it." As Clara closed the journal, she heard a soft whisper behind her. She turned to see the clone of Lily standing in the doorway, her eyes filled with an eerie, otherworldly light. "You should not have come here," the clone said, her voice like the rustling of dry leaves. "You should have left us to our rest." Clara stumbled back, her heart pounding with terror. She turned to flee, but the clone of Samuel blocked her path, his face contorted with a malicious grin. "You cannot escape us," he hissed. "We are the future. We are the inheritors of this world." Clara screamed as the clones advanced on her, their hands reaching out like talons. She fought with all her might, but their strength was overwhelming. As darkness claimed her, she knew that she had made a terrible mistake. The town of Hollow Creek never saw Clara again. Her car was found abandoned on the outskirts of the woods, and her belongings were discovered scattered throughout the Thornon Mansion. The townsfolk whispered of her fate, their fears of the mansion and its dark secrets renewed. Years turned into decades, and the legend of Dr. Edgar Thornon and his clones became a cautionary tale, a chilling reminder of the dangers of playing God. The mansion stood as a crumbling monument to his folly, its secrets forever entombed within its shadowy walls. And yet, some say that on dark and stormy nights, the ghostly figures of the clones can still be seen wandering the woods, their eyes filled with a haunting sadness. They are the echoes of a past that refuses to be forgotten, a testament to the power of grief and the terrible price of ambition. And it is not the power of science that shapes our world, but the choices we make and the consequences we must face. And so, the story of Dr. Edgar Thornon serves as a grim reminder that some doors are best left unopened and some secrets are best left undisturbed. Chapter 3. The Legacy. As the years passed, the tale of Dr. Edgar Thornon and his clones became a staple of local folklore, whispered in hushed tones around campfires and passed down through generations. The Thornon Mansion, now a crumbling ruin, stood as a grim testament to the dangers of unchecked ambition and the perils of meddling with the natural order. As the years passed, the tale of Dr. Edgar Thornon and his clones became a staple of local folklore, whispered in hushed tones around campfires and passed down through generations. The Thornon Mansion, now a crumbling ruin, stood as a grim testament to the dangers of unchecked ambition and the perils of meddling with the natural order. The investigators arrived in Hollow Creek on a crisp autumn morning, their van laden with an array of high-tech equipment designed to detect and record supernatural phenomena. They were greeted with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension by the townsfolk, who viewed their mission with a blend of skepticism and hope. "You be careful up there," the innkeeper warned as the group checked into their rooms. "There's more to them woods than meets the eye." The investigators assured the old man that they were well prepared and set out toward the Thornon Mansion, their hearts filled with a mix of excitement and trepidation. As they made their way through the dense forest, they could not shake the feeling that they were being watched, that unseen eyes followed their every move. The mansion loomed before them, its once grand facade now marred by the ravages of time and neglect. The investigators set up their equipment in the overgrown gardens, their cameras and microphones trained on the crumbling structure as they prepared to spend the night within its shadowy walls. As darkness fell, the group ventured inside, their flashlights casting eerie shadows on the decaying interior. They moved from room to room, their footsteps echoing through the empty halls as they called out to the spirits that were said to linger within. At first, there was only silence, the heavy stillness of a place long abandoned. But as the night wore on, the investigators began to notice strange phenomena. Doors creaked open and shut of their own accord, and the faint sound of footsteps echoed through the darkness. The air grew cold, and a sense of oppressive dread settled over the group. In the basement laboratory, the investigators discovered the remnants of Edgar's experiments, the shattered equipment and faded notes, a chilling reminder of his desperate quest to resurrect his family. As they sifted through the debris, they came across a hidden compartment in the wall, its contents untouched by the passage of time. Inside, they found a series of journals, their pages filled with Edgar's meticulous handwriting. The journals detailed the final days of his experiments, his growing desperation, and his ultimate realization that he had created something far beyond his control. "The clones are not stable," he wrote. "Their minds are fragmented, their personalities warped by the trauma of their creation. They are not my family, they are monsters, born of my own hubris and despair." As the investigators read the journals, they began to understand the true nature of the forces that lingered within the mansion. The clones, it seemed, were not mere echoes of the past, but sentient beings, their existence a twisted parody of the lives they were meant to replace. Determined to lay the spirits to rest, the investigators set up a seance in the heart of the mansion, their voices raised in a desperate plea for the clones to reveal themselves. As they chanted, the air grew thick with an otherworldly presence, and the temperature in the room plummeted. A chilling wind swept through the mansion, and the figures of the clones materialized before the investigators' eyes. Elizabeth, Lily, and Samuel stood before them, their faces contorted with a mix of sadness and malice. "You should not have come here," Elizabeth hissed, her voice like the rustling of dry leaves. "You should have left us to our rest." The investigators stumbled back, their hearts pounding with terror. But they held their ground, their voices raised in a desperate plea for the clones to find peace. "We understand your pain," the lead investigator said, his voice trembling with emotion. "But you cannot remain here, bound to this place by your anger and despair. You must move on and let the past be laid to rest." For a moment, the clones hesitated, their eyes filled with a haunting sadness. Then, with the final chilling scream, they vanished, their spectral forms dissolving into the shadows. The mansion fell silent. The oppressive presence that had hung over it for so long finally lifted. The investigators looked at each other, their faces pale but filled with a sense of relief and accomplishment. As they packed up their equipment and made their way back to the van, they knew that they had succeeded in their mission. The spirits of the Thornon Mansion had been laid to rest, and the dark legacy of Dr. Edgar Thornon had finally been brought to an end. Yet, as they drove away from Hollow Creek, the investigators could not shake the feeling that their work was not yet done. For they knew that there were other places, other secrets waiting to be uncovered, and that the battle between the living and the dead was far from over. And so, the tale of Dr. Edgar Thornon and his clones serves as a chilling reminder of the dangers of playing God and the terrible price that must be paid for meddling with the natural order. For in the end, it is not the power of science that shapes our world, but the choices we make and the consequences we must face. As the mansion fades into the mists of time, so too does the memory of the man who dared to defy nature, his ambition a cautionary tale for those who would seek to follow in his footsteps. And though the woods of Hollow Creek may whisper his name on dark and stormy nights, the spirit of Edgar Thornon and the echoes of his tragic experiment will forever remain a haunting testament to the power of grief and the folly of unchecked ambition.